We'll find our basic posture, sitting back in the hips a little. Chin back, let the crown rise. Relax the face and jaw. Relax, let the tip of the tongue relax up to the roof of the mouth. Try to find that as a natural and forced position. So we sit back a little on the hips, let the back open up, around, as if the upper back is enclosing the chest. Let the base of the spine sink down, the tailbone drop under the body. And we're tipping forward just a little bit from the hips, as if we're leaning just slightly at the same time as we sit back. That movement comes right from the top of the thighs, until I can feel the weight even front to back on both feet. I start to feel like the arches are engaged, as if the feet are lightly grabbing the floor, without intentionally making an effort that way. As we find the posture, we should start to feel the breath fill in the low abdomen automatically. Shift in the emphasis of the breath from the chest to the abdomen. Feeling gentle fullness in that area as it receives the breath. Feeling that we can release all the excess tension down through the body, right down through the feet, down through the floor. We can do a weight shifting exercise while maintaining that posture. So rocking forward and back from the ankles, about 70% of my weight. Feel how the feet spread out as I go forward, and grab the floor as I sit back. When we find the posture correctly, automatically my feet should grab the floor. Right? Again, it's not an extra action. Side to side. $70% of the weight. Really giving a lot of attention to how I can relax down through the hip on the lighter side. Keep that lighter foot planted. Circle. Again, circling is from the ankles, but I'll feel it a little bit up in the hips as well. It's gentle adjustment. So I feel the continuity of this motion all the way up through the legs, right up into the abdomen, the low back. I feel some of that gentle adjustment as I move through the circle in the low back area, in the deep abdomen. And after a while, I may even feel like there's a circle happening in the deep abdomen as well. But the primary intention is just to maintain that posture we began with as we do the weight shift. Relax the breath down. The breath is completely independent from this weight shift. It's much slower, ideally. When we looked at a little bit of movement to free up the upper body, so looking up but somehow keeping the chin a little back, doing that very light stretch, move right down smoothly into the chest. connecting the neck to the upper back, into the chest, while maintaining the basic posture so the weight sinks down, stabilizes the hips. So I don't see any outward movement really at the waist, but I do feel it right across the upper chest and upper back. Chest lengthening. As I look down, that front area consolidates. And maintaining the same head carriage to this range of motion is quite tricky. So no matter what we do in Tai Chi Walking, the feeling of how my head is placed is essentially the same. Because normally we would think the chin's going to fly up when I look upward. I have to keep it a little bit back. This is all very gentle. It's a very light intention. It's more of an exploration, feeling how to do it than working very hard. The same kind of movement side to side, keeping the chin in a little bit. And feeling how each position releases the weight down through the body just a little differently. Right? So here I'm emphasizing that whole side right down through the hip and leg. So while I don't see the hips moving, I'm listening for that effect, that release of tension down. So that's how a movement like this is still really crucial to what we are calling a walking exercise. And even here, I may find that the breath can become nice and relaxed and slow and be a bit slower than the movement. Circle. Pause and reverse. So really quite challenging to keep that quality of the sort of chin back, the crown lifted through a whole circle. And then we're going to release the shoulders a bit more by shrugging the shoulders forward and back. Feeling how the shoulder blades are sliding forward and back. And then I can think of also gathering the shoulder blades a little bit down at the two extremes. In the middle, the shoulders sort of pop up to their normal height. Forward and down, and back and down. And then think of pulling one whole shoulder down into the body. Let the other one rise up automatically when that happens. Two arms, a balance scale. Strongly, but gently, meaning without any stiffness, without any excessive force. While maintaining the same posture, while keeping the breath deep and relaxed. Roll the shoulders. Nice, generous range of motion. Reverse. Any tension we're holding up in the neck and shoulders is really going to make it hard to find the right feeling of the walking. Now I can My stance is a little wider than my hips. You probably want to be a little wider than your hips. I'm actually going to widen my stance a little bit more. And as I do that, I'm going to sit down a little deeper. So more flexion at the ankle, the knee, and the hip. A little bit of a feeling of sitting back, what's called the horse riding stance. This is a very moderate version of that horse riding stance, but I still have a feeling like I'm in the saddle. That when I drop the tailbone under, I can feel a little stretch in the low back. I feel a little fullness there. I feel like I'm sitting back a little bit, but my weight stays even toe to heel on my feet. So to get that feeling, I really have to relax the whole back, especially down through the lumbar region. Relax the hips. The legs are going to open up into a natural arch. So I never try to push my knees apart. This arch of the legs is formed by what's really happening in the low back and hip region. So the hips are opening outward, just relaxing outward. I try to relax through both the back of the hips and the outside of the hips. And we've been doing a little turning. As I turn to one side, I try to leave the other leg behind. Let the inner hip area, the groin area, open up. So that my back knee, the knee I'm turning away from, does not twist it at all. It just settles into its position. The outside of that foot that I'm turning away from stays rooted to the ground. Little toe stays down. I'll feel a little adjustment in the ankle and the foot, but I'm not going to see any big knee movement. And all the pivoting feels like it's happening from right below the hip bones, right at the top of the thigh. This does not need to be a big range of motion. If you try to make it too big, your legs are going to start to twist. We want to avoid that. You can see how my upper body is just riding along with the hips. I'll pause and do a little weight shifting again. And as little movement in the knees as possible. So I shift about 70% of my weight, relaxing through the lighter leg, through the outside of the foot, to keep that foot planted. And that way there's going to be very little movement of that knee. And the feeling of the arch of sitting in the saddle is going to be maintained. And then if I put them together, I can shift and turn to the same side. It makes it considerably harder to keep that back foot planted. To let that back hip relax and open up sufficiently to continue to drop 30% of my weight through the whole of the foot, including outside the little toe. This is not about making a real big range of motion, but trying to make it relaxed and stable and precise. That's where the challenge is. What's happening up here is still important. Chin back. Sink the shoulder blades down into your back. Breathing still deep and relaxed and slow. And then reverse the turn. Now it gets a little trickier. So now 70% of my weight's on this side, but I'm turning the other way. So it's this hip on the heavy side that has to open up like a hinge. It never feels like I'm leaning in any direction. I'm shifting the weight. Line of gravity is always straight down into the ground. I never feel like I'm bending forward or to the side. Now I'm going to turn one toe out. I'm not going to worry about turning from the hips. I'm just going to go back to the weight shift. So 70%. This is going to allow me to move a little further into that toed out foot. Open up that back hip a little bit more. Just with the same 70% weight shift. How to relax that back hip, down through the little toe, down through the heel. When I sit back, I want to make sure the front leg stays a little bit bent and doesn't slacken. So that front foot stays loaded, about 30% of the weight. Toe in, feet are parallel, toe out to the other side, same weight shift. Smooth, regular, nice, even rhythm. And then I'm going to turn my hips to the front towards that turned out foot as I shift, which makes relaxing that back hip and keeping the back foot planted significantly more difficult. Just going as far as I can while keeping that back foot planted, while dropping the tailbone under still, without feeling like I'm twisting up that back knee. Just going as far as we can. Not leading with the shoulders or the upper body, all the movements coming here from down at the hip joint. Go in, go out to the other side again, shift and turn. And when I come back, it just feels sort of like elastic recoil, right? There's a little stretch, and then I just sort of bounce back. The hips come to a more neutral angle. Turn towards that front foot and relax back. Here it's much harder, as I said, to drop the tailbone under. You'll feel a real stretch in the front of the hip. That's the stretch we're really looking for, but not forcing. You'll notice I'm keeping a nice even height, right? I'm not popping up and down, but my head is staying level. Do one more turning exercise. Here I'm standing a little wider than hips width again. And I'm going to turn the toe in on one side and feel that that movement's coming from both hip joints. Right? So one leg isn't moving, but I still feel like both hips are rotating inward. And then I'm going to turn the feet away from each other, from the hips. So now both hips are opening. Again, one leg is not moving. So only one leg moves at a time, but both hips are working. This is such an important idea and really easy to miss. At the hip that's important as I turn to this side is really the back hip, the one that's swinging open like a hinge and leaving this leg nice and stable like a post, but without fighting to keep it, right? I don't want to stiffen, overly tense that leg, trying to keep it still. I want to just relax my weight down through it, let that kind of relaxation release, make it very stable. So here's the back hip. Turn in, back hip swings open. The lighter foot is pivoting on the heel. So there's a little bit of a weight shift that lets the ball of the foot pop up off the floor. Comes back down on pigeon-toed. And the main idea here is just relax the whole hip area all the way around. Relax the low back, let the tailbone drop under the body. Let all the weight sink freely. And the more I can really release my weight down, the more I'll feel a very light, sort of spontaneous stability coming back up to support my posture. So these are the tools we need for the basic Tai Chi walking pattern. We've started looking at already. Toe out to one side, leave that leg behind. Then I shift the weight, and there's this stepping up. Okay, so if I were facing the camera during this position, you see my feet are parallel, that the weighted foot is a little bit ahead of the light foot. So the ball of this foot behind the big toe is sort of facing the middle of the arch, like a jigsaw puzzle piece. And here you see the width of my feet, that's about the amount of space between them. So like there's room for one of my feet between the feet. The lighter foot's just on the ball and toes, the heel is just naturally popping up off the floor because of the position and the weighting. So that's that in-between step. And then we've been doing kind of a zigzag pattern, which helps me get that stretch, right? That opening of the hips, like two hinges. Come down on the heel, roll forward. And as I pass the 50-50 mark, that's where I'm really going to start to think of relaxing down through the back leg, even as the weight comes off. So the little toe stays down. So back. Now, if it's comfortable, you can again open up the hips a little bit more here. Shift forward. So what did I do there? I added a piece where I'm sitting back, opening the hips a little bit more, shifting forward again. This time I'm going to go past that 70-30 mark and shift all my weight, and the back foot's going to step up. Now open the hips, right? It's a big stretch. How big a stretch sort of depends on your hips, so let them talk to you. Don't turn your toes out too far to the side, especially if a lot of that's coming from your ankle. We want all that rotation to be really coming from the hip, not any extra from down in the ankle and foot. So however far you can comfortably get, and then shifting the weight. And you can let your hips turn a little to the front again. And you might find as you do that, the back foot adjusts a little, it pivots slightly so that it maintains a comfortable position. Now I sit back 70%, the ball of the front foot comes up again, shift forward. If it's comfortable, if you have room, you can toe out a little further. Remember that it's not coming from my toes, it's coming from my hips, and it's coming from both hips opening up. There you go. I pass through that 70% here. Feel that big stretch. Then as I move to 100%, the back foot peels up. Step. Open the hips to step out. Shift. Let the back foot pivot a little bit as my hips turn towards the front. I turn towards that front leg. Sit back. Open up a little bit more as I shift. Leave that back foot down as long as you can. Really relax that back hip deeply. Then let the foot peel up as we pass the 70% mark. Step up parallel. Yeah, so right now my feet are probably out of the camera. Hopefully you have the idea. So what's with all the funny choreography? The funny choreography is to give more opportunities, right, for this opening up and lightly stretching and releasing the leg, particularly the back leg. But that changes as we change sides, right? Go out, step up. Back foot adjusts, 70% forward, relaxing, releasing through the back leg, and then sit back again. Toe out. Shift forward. You can see with all the left and right, and back and forth, really I'm just moving in a straight line when it's all combined. When all is said and done, I'm really just walking forward in this very strange way. Today I want to turn around now. Maybe I'll take one more step so that my feet are more visible. I'm in that forward position, what we call a bow stance, with the 70% of the weight forward. And now I'm going to step my back foot, instead of stepping it up parallel and a little bit behind, I'm going to step in front of the other foot, the weighted foot, onto the heel and turn back and toe in. So for a moment, my feet sort of make a T. Then I'm going to shift my weight to the foot that just stepped up. Let the back foot pivot, and I'm in that parallel footing again, right? Staggered parallel feet. And I can just keep walking. And ideally, I kept the same height the whole time. I never stood up tall. The spine feels very long and tall, but the knees never straighten out. But sometimes this is described like riding in a sedan chair. Right? A sedan chair are the kind of chairs people used to be carried around in, right? So you'd have two or four or more people holding the poles, right, on either side of the chair, right? So someone of high social status, some grandee or something, is riding along, being carried by these bearers. So my torso is like that very important person. Right? My legs are the bearers. They're doing all the work. My trunk should just get this nice, smooth, even ride, sitting very straight and upright, like important people used to do. So even a little bit of that should feel like a fair amount of work, right? Not kind of panting work, right? But it's a lot of work for the legs, right? I just walked up and down once, and if I count the first one, that's like half the rug, and up and down the rug once this way. But you should feel it in your legs, and ideally, as I said before, throughout all the thicker area of the thigh, not so much down toward the knee. Right, so if I'm feeling any strain in my low back and my knee, it means the basic posture is not quite right yet. So I need to work on that basic posture, even head carriage. Feel how to release the excess tension, right, from these areas where it might collect. And always feel like all my weight just gets right down into the ground. And from the ground, I'm just getting a little light, spontaneous lift that feels like it opens up the joints and makes space. It's going to make the whole thing easier. But there has to be a certain amount of work in the muscles, and otherwise not the exercise. So let's finish off. This class is clearly going to end up being 40 minutes for a while, not half an hour. Let's finish off with that shifting and turning again, but this time we want to get the hands in play a little bit. In some ways, this walking is harder when the hands are, right, kind of immobile. Makes the choreography easier, but it doesn't necessarily make the balance easier. So here, it's as if my hands are resting on a tabletop. And I'm just going to shift the weight again and then turn to that side, letting that back hip open, releasing the weight through that back leg. And then sit back and then turn again. So here I'm separating the weight shift and the turn a little bit. Shift back first and then turn. And initially, most of my attention is to what's happening in the hips, locating the range of motion correctly, sinking the weight, right, keeping the light foot stable at 30%, keeping the little toe down. Right, dropping the tailbone under, lengthening, releasing the low back. With the hands in front, there can be a tendency for the shoulders, right, for my shoulder blades to reach forward a bit, wrap around my body or come forward, which is also going to tend to lift my shoulders up. So once I start integrating the arms like this, I need to give a little extra attention to that feeling of the shoulder blades sort of sinking down into my back and even just a little bit toward the spine. They're moving toward the middle of my back, very, very subtly. And the hands are just being carried along by the hip movement, right? The whole body is riding along on the hip bones. So there's very little, if any, twist at the waist, right? Shoulders aren't getting further than the hips. The head's not taking to the side. In fact, my head has to be very passive. Just come along And sometimes that's as hard as anything, strangely enough, is that the head wants to lead and my nose wants to get out in front, or people tend to keep their head sort of rigid and fixed in the middle. But here, there's going to be a line between my belt buckle, my navel, and my nose that's unbroken. Right? The head's not going to get left behind and it's not going to lead. This line is just going to stay nice and vertical. And this is really helpful for the whole body integration and for all the talk and the online advertisements about Tai Chi Walking. Tai Chi Walking is never meant to be a standalone exercise. Right? It's just kind of a stage of training. It's a very good exercise. After a while, there's no particular benefit to leaving out the arms. We might finish just by reversing this movement. So instead of sitting back, I feel like I'm shifting forward, looking to the side, and then keep the weight there and turn back and shift forward. Right, so I'm keeping the weight shifting and the hip turning really distinct, but integrated smoothly. Meaning there's no stop or pause. Shift, moves into the turning, returns to the shifting, back to turning very smoothly and evenly. The traditional name of this movement is the level hands, right? Like I said, they're sliding along a tabletop. Trace the fish, right? So the fish shape, right? The yin and yang, right? The yin and yang diagram, or Tai Chi diagram, as it's actually known. Right? So my hands end up making this kind of figure-8 pattern, like these two fish shapes, but not because my hands are steering, right? Just because they're being carried by the lower body. And they're not stiff and rigid, nor are they too loose and sort of flopping around. They're relaxed, lightly supported by that feeling of the posture, sinking the shoulders, head carriage. So I feel like there's a very subtle play in them, right? But they're not moving in this big visible way. The visible movement's coming all from the hips, just carrying the upper body, putting the hands along. Let's shake out the legs a little bit. Shake out the arms. Just give a little bounce, shake things free. Relax the abdomen. Relax the low back, relax the shoulders, hips. All right. Thank you very much.